Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We take the best research out there, dive right in, and pull out the knowledge you really need. Today we're tackling a pretty big question, one that needs a lot of nuance. Is it okay to have group sex?
It's a fascinating question, isn't it? Because, well, it's definitely not a simple yes or no. It's entirely conditional. Our goal today is really to break down what okay means here. Using the material we've reviewed, we'll look at it ethically, psychologically, legally, and crucially, from a health standpoint. Think of it as building a kind of practical framework.
Okay, so let's set the stage first. When we say group sex, what exactly are we talking about? It seems like an umbrella term.
It absolutely is. Yeah, it covers quite a range. Everything from a threesome, sometimes called a V, to swinging, partner swapping, even orgies. And the reasons people engage, just as varied.
Right, what kind of motivations are we seeing?
Well, for some, it might be straightforward sexual exploration, maybe fulfilling a fantasy. But for couples already together, the reasons often involve seeking novelty, maybe trying to strengthen their bond through a shared kind of adventurous experience that really demands deep trust.
Okay, and unpacking that word okay. When we ask if it's okay, we're really asking, what, 4 different things at once?
Precisely. Is it morally acceptable? Is it psychologically sound for everyone involved? Is it actually legal where you are? And maybe most critically, can it be done safely from a health perspective? If you fail on any one of those, the whole idea of it being okay kind of falls apart.
Makes sense. So where do we start? Ethics seems foundational.
Absolutely. Let's start there. The ethical foundation, which all the sources really hammer home, is consent. It's the absolute non-negotiable. But in a situation with multiple partners, standard consent isn't quite enough. It needs to be more specific. We need to talk about 3 key aspects: informed, enthusiastic, and ongoing consent.
Okay, informed, enthusiastic, ongoing. Let's break those down, because this sounds like where that intense level of communication really comes in. The sources definitely stress transparency, right? Especially with multiple people involved.
Totally. The vulnerability is higher, so the transparency has to be too.
Yeah.
So informed consent, that means everyone has the full picture. They need to know exactly what activities might happen, who's involved, and understand the potential risks, both physical and emotional. Crucially, the sources say, no deception, no coercion, and absolutely no pressure.
No pressure. That seems key. Like, if someone says yes just to please their main partner.
That's immediately unethical.
Right.
Informed means knowing everything upfront, willingly.
Okay. Then, enthusiastic consent. We hear no means no, but this sounds like more than that.
It really is. The standard isn't just the absence of a no. It has to be a clear, positive yes. Genuine desire, not just going along with it or, grudging acceptance. It has to be wanted.
Got it. And the third piece, ongoing consent. What does that mean in practice?
This one is so important. Ongoing consent means it's not a contract you sign and you're locked in. Anyone involved at any point during the encounter must feel completely free to say stop or withdraw their consent.
For any reason?
For any reason or no reason at all. And when they do, everything stops immediately. No judgment, no anger, no trying to convince them otherwise. That right to withdraw without consequence is absolutely fundamental.
Wow. Okay, so that communication piece, it's not just about the yes at the start. For couples already together, how does this play out before anything happens? You mentioned rules and boundaries.
Yeah, for established couples, the pre-encounter discussion has to be exhaustive, really thorough. This is where you define the specific rules. For instance, the sources mention terms like soft swap versus full swap.
What's the difference there?
Basically, it defines the level of intimacy allowed with others. Soft swap might mean things like kissing, touching, maybe oral sex are okay, but penetrative sex with someone other than your primary partner is off limits. Full swap generally means, well, pretty much anything goes, sexually speaking, within the agreed-upon group. Setting these boundaries very clearly and also maybe specifying if certain people or certain acts are completely off limits is vital for protecting the main relationship.
And I remember seeing a huge warning in the material about motivation. What was it?
Yes, a massive red flag. If a couple's relationship is already rocky or has serious problems, using group sex as a way to try and fix it, that's almost always a disaster.
Why? Doesn't it introduce excitement or something?
It might seem like it could, but it doesn't fix underlying issues like trust problems or communication breakdowns. Instead, it tends to magnify them. It puts immense pressure on a fragile foundation. It's not a solution, it's an accelerant for problems.
Okay, really important caution there. So the communication continues after the event too. You mentioned aftercare.
Yes, absolutely vital. The sources really emphasize this. Aftercare is that dedicated time immediately following the experience. It's about reconnecting with your primary partner, checking in emotionally, talking about how it went, how everyone's feeling, and just reaffirming that core bond.
Why is that specific step so critical? It sounds like it could be skipped if everyone feels okay.
Well, the emotional intensity of these experiences can be really high. You've got excitement, novelty, maybe some unexpected feelings, maybe even confusion. Without taking that specific time to process it together right afterward, feelings of insecurity or jealousy can start to creep in, or maybe a sense of distance. Aftercare helps ensure that the vulnerability shared doesn't end up damaging the primary connection. It's risk management for the relationship itself.
Okay, that makes sense. So assuming all these intense rules and communication protocols are followed, what does this actually feel like for people psychologically?
Yeah.
Let's shift to that. The research seems to suggest it's, well, a mixed bag, right? Highly individual outcomes.
Very much so. Yeah, studies like some published in the Archives of Sexual Behavior show a really broad spectrum of psychological effects. It depends heavily on the people, the context, the pre-existing relationship health. When things go well, meaning the foundation is solid, communication was clear, consent was impeccable, there can be positive impacts.
Like what?
For some couples, viewing it as this shared recreational, maybe slightly edgy adventure can genuinely boost relationship satisfaction. It can even sometimes enhance their private sex life later on.
Interesting. And for individuals?
It can be a path to sexual self-discovery, maybe overcoming certain inhibitions in a space that feels consensual and safe. This can lead to feeling more liberated, less shame around certain desires. And there's that interesting side effect you noted from the report. The need for such explicit communication skills here can actually improve communication in other parts of the relationship too. That clarity has spillover benefits.
Okay, so that's the potential upside. But there are significant warnings too, right? What are the main psychological risks the sources point out?
Definitely. The cautions are serious. Jealousy and insecurity are probably the most common negative emotions reported, and they can hit really hard even if you thought you were totally prepared. You're putting your core relationship dynamics under a microscope, essentially.
And what happens if those carefully negotiated boundaries get crossed? Or maybe the pre-talk wasn't as thorough as it needed to be.
That can lead to severe relational conflict. A breach of those specific agreements can shatter trust, sometimes irreparably. Plus, there's the complication of unexpected emotional attachments, developing deeper feelings for one of the other partners, which wasn't part of the plan and can really disrupt the primary relationship's rules.
And I remember reading about post-event shame, too, even if it was desired at the time.
Yeah, that's a real phenomenon. Societal messages about sex and monogamy run deep. So even if someone enthusiastically consented and enjoyed the experience, feelings of guilt or shame can surface afterward. Ultimately, the psychological outcome really seems to hinge on two things: how healthy the relationship was before the experience, and the emotional maturity and self-awareness of everyone involved.
Okay, so emotional risks are high, communication needs to be intense. Let's talk about the physical side, the health imperative. This feels pretty non-negotiable.
Absolutely non-negotiable. From a public health view, this is critical. Group sex inherently involves more potential transmission routes for STIs compared to monogamous sex. So a really rigorous approach to safety isn't just recommended, it's essential.
What does that rigorous approach look like, according to the sources? Where does it start?
It starts with comprehensive STI testing. And not just testing, but sharing results. All participants need recent, verified test results, and there needs to be complete transparency about everyone's status. And part of that transparency is understanding testing windows.
All right, can you quickly explain testing windows for us?
Sure. A testing window is simply the time lag between when someone might get infected and when a test can actually detect that infection reliably. So if someone was potentially exposed last week, a test today might still come back negative, even if they did contract something. That's why results need to be recent, and honesty about any potential exposures within that window is crucial.
So recent, verified tests, and open communication about status. What else? Barriers.
Consistent and correct use of barriers is paramount. That means external condoms, internal condoms, dental dams for any oral sex, and detail the material flags, which is often missed. You absolutely need to change condoms when switching between partners, or even when switching between different types of sex acts, like from anal to vaginal with the same partner.
That makes sense, preventing cross-contamination. What about other prevention tools?
Modern tools should definitely be part of the strategy. This includes regular testing. People engaging in group sex might need testing more often than the general population. Also, utilizing available vaccines, like for HPV and hepatitis A and B, and very importantly, for individuals at higher risk of HIV, using pre-exposure prophylaxis. The sources really highlight PAP as a vital tool for risk reduction in these scenarios.
Okay. And one more big health point from the report: sobriety.
Yes, a very strong recommendation for staying sober and clear-headed. Alcohol and drugs impair judgment significantly. That impacts not only the consistent use of safety measures like condoms, but critically, it undermines the ability to give or recognize informed, enthusiastic, ongoing consent. If judgment is impaired, consent itself becomes questionable, and safety protocols can easily fail. If these health measures aren't strictly followed, the activity definitely shifts from potentially okay into high-risk territory.
Right. Okay, so we've covered ethics, psychology, health. What about the outside world? Let's zoom out a bit and look at the legal and sociocultural context. How does society view this? Legally, is it straightforward?
Legally, it's surprisingly messy, actually. A real patchwork, depending on where you are.
Really, I kind of assumed private consensual acts between adults were generally okay legally.
You'd think so, but the sources point out that many places still have old, outdated laws on the books, laws against things like adultery, sodomy, or fornication.
And these are still enforced.
Criminally against private adults, rarely in most Western democracies today, but they're not completely irrelevant. They can sometimes be brought up in civil cases. The most common example is in divorce proceedings, especially custody battles. A lawyer might try to use participation in group sex to argue that a parent is somehow morally unfit.
Wow, okay, so those old laws can still have teeth, just maybe not criminal ones. What's the more common legal hurdle then?
Usually it revolves around public decency or public morality laws. This is mainly an issue if the activity happens somewhere considered commercial or semi-public, like, say, a swingers club that isn't careful about maintaining privacy. But the overall legal trend, thankfully, in most liberal societies is towards not interfering in what consenting adults do in private.
Okay, and culturally, how okay is it considered? Seems like huge variation there.
Massive variation. It's completely relative to the cultural or subcultural lens you're using. More traditional or conservative religious views often see any sex outside of monogamous marriage as unacceptable, so group sex would fall under adultery or be seen as sinful.
And on the other end?
More liberal or secular viewpoints tend to prioritize individual autonomy and consent. From that perspective, if everyone consents freely and no one outside the group is harmed, it's generally considered a matter of personal choice, morally neutral.
And then there's specific subcultures, right? Like swinging communities.
Exactly. Within communities like organized swinging circles, the practice isn't just tolerated, it's normalized. But it's usually governed by its own very strict, internally enforced codes of ethics codes that typically echo all the points we've made about consent, communication, and safety.
Okay, so pulling all these threads together, the ethics, the psychology, the health, the law, the culture, let's loop back to our original question. Is it okay?
And based on everything in the sources, the answer remains conditional. Yes, group sex can be okay, but only if it meets a very specific set of demanding requirements.
Let's recap those requirements one last time. What are the pillars for it being potentially okay?
Okay, number 1, unambiguous consent. That means fully informed, genuinely enthusiastic, and absolutely ongoing, with that guaranteed right to withdraw anytime. Number 2, robust communication. That's the meticulous pre-encounter boundary setting and the essential post-encounter aftercare. Number 3, scrupulous health and safety. Testing, transparency, consistent barrier use, maybe pre-P, and crucially, sobriety. And number 4, emotional maturity and preparedness. Ensuring the core relationship, if there is one, is healthy before you even consider it, and that all individuals are psychologically ready.
And conversely, it's decidedly not okay
If there's any hint of coercion or pressure, if it's being used desperately to try and fix a broken relationship, or if those health and safety protocols are ignored or treated casually. In those cases, it moves from potentially okay to likely harmful and destructive.
So the okayness isn't about the act itself inherently.
Not at all. It's entirely about the context.
Yeah.
The communication, the mutual respect, the commitment to everyone's physical and emotional safety. That's what makes the difference.
Which brings us to our final thought for you, our listener, to take away from this deep dive. The sources make it crystal clear. Radical honesty, incredibly detailed boundary setting, and really committed aftercare are absolute necessities for group sex to have a chance of being a positive experience. That intense level of communication, that constant checking in, that commitment to mutual respect, it's the absolute bedrock. So if that's what's required for complex multi-partner relationships to work well, what does that tell us about the level of communication and foundational health needed for any long-term intimate relationship to thrive, even just between two people? What happens when we let that level of honesty and care slip in any relationship? Something to think about. Keep diving deep.